Thank you for tuning into our Minnesota House of Representatives Candidate Forum. All candidates in House District 49B, 50A, and 50B were invited to participate in this forum. Due to COVID-19, this forum is being recorded without an audience, and all safety precautions recommended by the Minnesota Department of Health and the City of Bloomington are being followed. Hello everyone, I'm Amanda Crombie, co-president of the League of Women Voters Bloomington. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that never endorses any political party or candidate. Our purpose in hosting this forum is to provide you, the public, with the opportunity to learn more about the candidates so that you can make informed voting decisions. Your vote is your power. Let it be heard. A reminder, the general election is on Tuesday, November 3rd, but early voting in Minnesota begins on September 18th. To request your absentee ballot, go to mnvotes.org. Also, the League of Women Voters Bloomington 2020 Nonpartisan Voter Guide is now available at Civic Plaza. Swing by and pick one up. It's free. So please vote, Bloomington.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's general election candidate forum for Minnesota State House candidates in Districts 49B, 50A, and 50B. This forum is being recorded in Council Chambers, Bloomington City Plaza, without an audience. The City of Bloomington's coronavirus safety protocol is being followed. I'm Deb Brinkman. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's program. The purpose of this evening's forum is to hear the candidates for Minnesota House District 49B, Minnesota House District 49A, and Minnesota House District 50B discuss issues that are important to you. We will try to cover as many issues as possible in the time that we have. If your questions are not addressed during this forum, please feel free to contact the candidates directly. The views expressed in this forum will be those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. The fact that the League is sponsoring this forum does not imply the support of any candidate. Here are the rules and format for tonight's forum. Speaking order was set before the forum and will alternate with each question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, 90 seconds to answer each question posed by the moderator, and 1 minute for closing statement. League volunteers will time candidate responses and hold up signs to show candidates how much time they have left and when they must stop. Candidates, please finish your sentence and obey the stop sign. Questions for today's forum were submitted by Bloomington residents via email. Residents were invited by League of Women Voters Bloomington website, League of Women Voters Bloomington Facebook page, and a news release distributed by the Sun Current. As moderator, I'll ask all the questions. League of Women Voters Bloomington determines which questions will be asked and attempts in good faith to cover the topics of interest indicated by the submitted questions. All submitted questions become the property of the League of Women Voters Bloomington. And we'll go to the introduction of the candidates. For House of Representatives, District 49B, we have Steve Elkins, who's the Democratic candidate, and Joe Thalman, who is the Republican candidate. For House of Representatives 50A, we have Tim Johnson, who is not here this evening, and we have Michael Howard, who is the Democratic candidate. For the House of Representatives 50B, we have Andrew Carlson, who is with us this evening. He's the Democratic candidate, and Gary Heyer, who is the Republican candidate, and he has declined to participate this evening. So we'll start with opening remarks, and we'll start by beginning with Mr. Steve Elkins.
Thank you, Deb. I'm State Representative Steve Elkins. I represent House District 49B, which constitutes western Bloomington and portions of Edina, Minnetonka, and Eden Prairie. I'd first of all like to thank the League for providing us this opportunity. My wife Judy and I are both active members of the Bloomington League of Women Voters, and my wife Judy is a member of a team with the State League that registers new citizens to vote on the day that they're naturalized. We have lived in our home near Lake Normandale for the past 35 years, where we raised our two adult daughters, Michelle and Danielle, both of whom are graduates of Jefferson. I'm an economist by education, and for the last 25 years of my career, I've been an IT information architect, the last 10 of which are in healthcare IT. And so I've always been, a very empirical, data-driven kind of guy in my decision-making. And I'm also very proud of the accomplishments that I've had in my first term in the legislature on the area of IT reform, especially the role I played in streamlining the Real ID process and making sure that the MNLARS replacement project comes in on time and under budget at the beginning of next year. I've got local government in my blood. I've served Bloomington in one way or another for the last 25 years, starting as a traffic commissioner, then a planning commissioner, housing and redevelopment authority commissioner, city council member, the city's Met Council representative, and for the last 2 years in the state legislature. I've the vice chair of the local government committee, been honored as a legislator of distinction by the League of Minnesota Cities. And I've been endorsed by the mayors of all 4 of the cities that I represent this year, so I'm very proud of that as well. Working on healthcare reform, IT reform, housing affordability, consumer data privacy, and a big accomplishment on a bill that allows, a law that allows cities to reduce the residential speed limits. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. For the next opening remarks, we'll go to Joe Thalman.
Thank you. May I remove the mask to speak?
To speak.
Okay, great. Okay, hi, my name is Joe Thalman. I'm a recent transplant to the Twin Cities area. My wife and I moved here just 5 years ago to be with family. And the most important thing I have to say tonight is I'm missing an anniversary dinner with my wife. Honey, I love you. I couldn't imagine life without you, and I'm so glad that we get to share this chapter of our lives together. And it's great to be here in Minnesota. And I guess I'm running as the law and order candidate. And I just would like to, I like the notion that when someone needs to call 911, whether it's for a structure fire or for a medical emergency or a more urgent matter that requires police intervention and the use of force to prevent a robbery or a burglary, a potential murder or rape, God forbid, that they are actually able to deliver the intervention that is needed and preserve public safety. I'm a firm supporter of the law enforcement, first responders, and the fire department. I have a great interest in seeing that the school year is not abridged any more than it potentially looks like it will be already. I'd like to see the kids back in a full person-to-person learning as soon as possible, and I would like to see the economy reopened so that we can rebuild our way out of this financial deficit that we are finding ourselves in. We've done a tremendous job of flattening the curve, which was the original plan, and we are now at a point where we need to consider, as the test results come in nearing the 5% threshold recommended by the World Health Organization, as we drop below that 5% rolling average, we need to have a plan to immediately get the economy going without restrictions as much as possible. Thank you. Look forward to the questions.
Thank you to Joe Thalman. Next, we will go to Michael Howard.
Hello, my name is Michael Howard, and I'm the state representative representing Richfield and Bloomington in the Minnesota House. In my first term in the legislature, I really sought to work with our community and to take on the big fights on behalf of Minnesotans, because when we come together, when we work hard, we can accomplish big things. And in my first term, I was able to work alongside neighbors and advocates to pass Alex Law to make sure that no Minnesotan will again lose their life because they can't afford the insulin they need to survive. I also worked hard to pass housing assistance for Minnesotans that need it desperately during this virus and pandemic, and pass police arbitration reform as part of a set of criminal justice reforms that aim to strengthen public safety and to make us all safer. As we know, Minnesotans are facing immense challenges amidst a deadly virus that continues to kill Minnesotans. More than 2,000 are dead. We need to be vigilant, lead with science and reason, and do everything we can to make sure that Minnesotans get through this. And as your state representative, I will work hard to fight for health care for all, for affordable child care and housing, and to make sure that Minnesotans always have an advocate at the state capitol. Those at the very top have done quite well economically during this COVID epidemic. The billionaires are getting richer, but the vast majority of Minnesotans are struggling. They need us to work. There's more of us than them, and we need to work together to make Minnesota a stronger place. Thank you.
Thank you to Michael Howard. And next we will go to Andrew Carlson.
Thank you, Deb, and to the League. I'm State Representative Andrew Carlson, and it's an honor to serve in the Minnesota House, and it's a job I take very seriously. By way of a little bit of background, my wife, Kari, and I have been married for the past 18 years now and have 2 teenage daughters, both who attend Bloomington Public Schools. Prior to being elected to the Minnesota House, I served on the Bloomington City Council. And I think that's where I really first had an opportunity to understand that good government and what that means in people's lives. How government can really be a force for good and building a better future for all. So in the Minnesota House, I serve as chair of the Property and Local Tax Committee. I also serve on taxes, judiciary and civil law, commerce. And these have provided me with an opportunity to really engage with Minnesotans across the state and share the voice of Bloomington at the state capitol, so to make sure that our Bloomington values are brought to the capitol. And I think we have done that in an impactful way with not only those that are willing to come testify on important bills like criminal background checks and red flag laws, but also the everyday bills that maybe don't get the headlines in the news, but are just as important to impacting people's lives. So I look forward to today's debate and sharing my views on the topics. Thank you.
Thank you to Andrew Carlson. And we will begin with our question segment. You'll have 90 seconds to answer each question. And the first question will begin with you, Andrew Carlson. What are your top 3 legislative priorities?
Well, number one, of course, is continuing to combat the coronavirus. We just need to continue to take this virus very seriously. We need to look to our experts, our scientists, to ensure that we are moving forward in such a way to keep people safe and healthy. So that first and foremost, I would say, is 1, 2, and 3, because nothing else can really happen in moving the state forward until we get a handle on the virus. So I think I'm just going to leave my answer at that for now.
Thank you, Andrew. Next, we'll move to Michael Howard. Top 3 legislative priorities.
Thank you. I would concur that by far the top priority is fighting this pandemic. And, it's unfortunately become very politicized. But really, our common enemy, whether we're Democrats or Republicans, should be this pandemic. It's a killer. As I mentioned, 2,000 Minnesotans have died. I think that some of us have got a little desensitized to just how harmful this virus is. And to be totally honest, even an event like tonight would be more safer if we were participating virtually versus in person. And I think all elements of our society, we all have a role by wearing masks, by not taking unnecessary risks, and realizing that it's not just a number. Today, somebody's grandmother, somebody's son died because of COVID-19. And I think we need to think about that and put that front and center in our policymaking. Science and reason must lead the way. Beyond COVID-19, I would highlight our severe racial inequities that have been laid bare by this virus in terms of housing, in terms of economics, in terms of health. We need to bring a racial justice lens to all of our work at the state capitol. And if we do that, we can create a Minnesota where everyone has the same opportunity to succeed.
Thank you to Michael. And next we're actually going to go to Steve Elkins.
Yeah, I think in terms of the big picture, COVID-19, staying on top of that is there. This is going to be a budget year, and so it's very important to me that as we move to balance what's currently looking like a $4 billion budget deficit, that we balance the budget in a way that doesn't just shift the burden onto our cities and our school districts, which is what usually happens. They're both under enough stress right now. And then things that I'm personally working on, putting a lot of effort into, or include things like housing affordability. I'm going to have a major bill on that this coming year, and healthcare costs. I've got a number of bills that would improve price transparency and price competition that I'm working on as well.
Thank you, Steve. And Joe Thalman.
Thank you. I think we're all kind of focused and hovering over the target, which is the COVID recovery and the economic consequences of that recovery. They really go hand in glove. We are nearing the point, though, where the World Health Organization gave us the guideline that once the testing on a rolling 2-week average drops below 5% positivity, that they recommend reopening the economy and allowing children to go back to school. We've been testing in the low 5-point range for the last few weeks, and we're going to be dropping below that probably within the next 2 weeks. So I hope that if we haven't already addressed it by then, I hope that we get the schools reopened. I hope that we get a booming economic recovery underway. And I hope that we do everything we can to entice all of our employers to not only stay here, but expand and induce other employers who can provide high-paying jobs and great benefits with health care benefits for all of their employees to locate to Minnesota. We do have an abundance of really high-quality employers here in the state. We're lucky for that. We have a great healthcare system, a tremendous education system, and it's a shame to see them kind of being shelved for right now while we negotiate through this morass of the COVID virus and all of its manifold consequences. I would also like to see that this does need to be a little bit more of a pluralistic approach, and I think it's time for the governor to relinquish his emergency authorization. And if he doesn't have a chance to relinquish it by then, I would like to see that the House and Senate move to relinquish those powers.
Thank you, Joe. And for the next question, Joe, we'll start with you. So, Joe Thalman. Largely due to the economic fallout from the pandemic, Minnesota's state budget looks bleak. How do you propose to deal with this? Please address both spending and revenue.
Well, that's going to be an interesting session in St. Paul come January for everyone on both sides of the aisle to come together and address those issues. It's going to require a lot of accommodation and negotiation on all parties. And I think everyone needs to be prepared for the short period of time while we work through this recovery to take some cuts to spending. I think that it, again, needs to be a pluralistic approach. We need to include as much of the community as possible, the legislators in both the House and Senate, to contribute their plans, their insights, and share the experiences that they've gleaned from the voters in their various districts. There is a lot of hardship out there. People need to be getting back to work. We need to restore the economy, to increase the tax base, to work our way out of this deficit.
Thank you, Joe. Next, we will go to Steve Elkins.
Thank you. Yes, we're looking at a looming, $4 billion or so budget deficit this year. It's going to be very difficult to close because about half the state's budget, the general fund budget, is just education. And most of that money goes to our local school districts. And I don't think now is the time to be cutting the funds that we send to our local school districts when they're facing such challenges in dealing with how to educate kids in the COVID-19 era. Another quarter of the state's budget is health and human services, most of which is either the state's mandated share of the Medicaid program or nursing homes. And I don't think we want to be kicking people off of their health care or cutting aid to nursing homes right now either. So I served on the State Government Finance Committee this year, which oversees the budgets of all of the state's administrative agencies. And you would think that there would be a lot of money to be cut there, but in truth, that committee only has purview over about 2.5% of the state's budget. So even though the administration is going to be cutting heads in those departments, trimming that budget, that's not going to get us there. So I would predict that we're probably going to move $450 million roughly from that was diverted from the general fund to transportation a couple of years ago, move that back and have to probably backfill that with an increase in the gas tax. So,
Thank you, Steve. Next, we will go to Andrew Carlson.
Yeah, Representative Elkins hit on the two big parts of the state budget being schools and healthcare, and it's hard to see how you can make significant cuts to those two areas based on the situation we're in with the current pandemic. We have a responsibility to protect Minnesotans and to make sure that they are safe. So we definitely need to take a close look at new revenues as ways in which to make up for those shortfalls. There are those at the top that are doing quite well, that are profiting from this current situation, and there's opportunities there in which to help backfill some of the state budget. So new revenues clearly should be part of the consideration in addressing the budget shortfall. One key area that I would like to see additional investment in is public health. As the pandemic has laid bare, the underfunding in terms of public health measures was readily apparent. And I think to avoid such a situation from occurring again or so severely, investments in public health, as was brought forward by the Obama administration, I think would go a long way in preventing such a crisis from happening again.
Thank you, Andrew. And Michael Howard.
My priority with our state budget will be to make sure that the Minnesotans that have been most harmed during this pandemic aren't the ones who are harmed by budget cuts. In particular, I'm talking about our kids in our schools, people with disabilities, and those who have lost their health care. The worst thing we could do is cut health care that hurts families, hurts kids, hurts people with disabilities. And the reality is we do have some solutions before us. As I mentioned, those at the very top have actually done very well in this pandemic. There was just a report that the owner of Amazon would have enough money that he's made during this pandemic to give every Amazon employee a check for $100,000. We should look at raising taxes on corporations and the very wealthy. Otherwise, it's those at the bottom that are going to experience the pain. We're also going to have to get some help from Congress. There was federal resources that helped us get through the Great Recession. That will be an important piece of the pie. And we have to look at creative ways of raising revenue. This isn't the reason the primary reason to move forward with legalizing cannabis, but I believe we absolutely should move forward with legalizing cannabis, and that is part of an opportunity to raise some revenue and be creative. But we need to focus on the people and make sure that our decisions are guided by Minnesotans who have been feeling the pain over this past year.
Thank you, Michael. And Michael, we'll start with you for this next question. Do you envision a northern Minnesota where mining and conservation can coexist? Is copper nickel mining an existential threat to the boundary waters, or are environmentalist threats to the mining economy of northern Minnesota, and why?
Thank you for the question. There's a lot to unpack there. I guess where I would start, since the boundary waters were raised, is I really think the boundary waters is a crown jewel for our state. And we should be very, very concerned about anything that would jeopardize such a crown jewel for our state. And there's been a lot of study in terms of the economics that show the economic gains that our state experiences because of tourism and because of the boundary waters outweigh the potential gain of mining. So I think as a legislature, we need to take a very hard look at that and be mindful that the corporate entities that wish to mine are foreign entities, and we've seen when pollution does happen, this is going to last for hundreds of years, outlasting these companies. And so I'm very concerned about the financial assurances piece. And lastly, I think it undercuts the strength of the Iron Range in northern Minnesota to assume in part, as I think this question does, that mining is the strength of northern Minnesota, or the sole strength in Minnesota. I understand that's clearly part of northern Minnesota's heritage, an important one, and one to honor. But there is so much more to northern Minnesota than mining, and we need to recognize that we share much more than divides us, and work together to build a great state all across.
Thank you, Michael. And next we will go to Andrew Carlson.
Thank you. Representative Howard really hit on some important points, and I think they are worth repeating. The boundary waters is worth protecting. Once it's gone, it'll be gone forever, and what a shame that would be. So we do need to take actions now to preserve that state jewel for generations to come, but not at the expense of Minnesotans. There are opportunities in terms of the clean energy future for Minnesota to where good local jobs can replace what may be lost due to mining. So it's not a give and take. It's an and. It's not an either or, it's an and. I truly do believe that. And there are plenty of good examples of the creativity and innovation that's taking place up on the Iron Range and throughout northern Minnesota. But the future of Minnesota is clean energy and a healthy climate. These are Minnesota values, and I think something we all agree on. It's just having the will to pursue them and make for that brighter future.
Thank you, Andrew. Next, we will go to Joe Thalman.
Thank you. It is interesting that it's been noted that mining isn't the only game in town in the northern tier of the Iron Range, the northern tier of the state. I believe the healthcare is actually a larger segment of the economy, which is surprising to a lot of people, I believe. That being said, the mining sector has been provided a very historic segment of the jobs in that area. It's kind of part of the culture and tradition of the people who live in that area. I think that the people who live there, the miners, probably enjoy the boundary waters as much as anyone else, if not more than most people who have to take a trek up there. That's their background, that's their backyard rather, and that's where they recreate. I believe that we have in place through the EPA, through the regulation and oversight, adequate oversight to keep those mining operations safe. But no one wants to kind of roll the dice on that there is a disaster, but we need to kind of identify what kind of a disaster, what nature would lead to a damage to the boundary waters, and mitigate, perhaps curtail some operations. I think there's some room for negotiation on both parties. And moving forward, I think they'll come to an agreement on that.
Thank you, Joe. Steve.
Yes, thank you. I would say I'm very skeptical about the proposal for mining within the boundary waters watershed, and especially skeptical given the federal government's reluctance to, or the withholding of information that they've collected about the viability of mining in that area in particular. As others have said, that's the boundary waters are a crown jewel in the Minnesota park system, and I don't think we want to do anything to jeopardize that. I did participate in the freshman tour of the Iron Range this time last year, and afterwards, which was very informative, and afterwards did a great deal of research into my own, into the science of sulfide mining. My next door neighbor happens to be a retired geochemist from DNR who was able to kind of vet what I've been learning. But on the basis of that, I think that if we religiously enforce our environmental regulations and make sure that we have adequate financial assurances. And I think polymet, there's a possibility that one could be done safely. The big ifs are that you have to have enough money to be able to operate a reverse osmosis plant to take all the bad stuff out of the tailings in perpetuity, which is a lot of money that has to be collected very early in the mining process for that to work.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve, we'll start with you with this next question. Given the current developments in Minnesota and across the country regarding policing and race, how can the Minnesota Legislature simultaneously support police, reform policing, and build public trust in the police?
Thank you for the question. So yes, we did actually, on a very hard-fought, compromise bipartisan basis, enact a policing reform bill this year, and it probably didn't go quite as far as some of us would have preferred, but it did include provisions that, for example, included the strengthening the police officer standards training board. It included our arbitration reform to make it easier for police departments to fire bad cops and make it stick. Several other provisions, and we'll keep working on that. I think. I feel blessed to live in a community where we don't have a lot of problems. We have a well-trained, professional, well-funded police department, and when we have racial justice protests in Bloomington, and we do, the protesters get a police escort. And we don't see violence here like we do in many other cities, and I'm very proud of that. So this is something that it does deserve a lot of attention. We accomplished a lot, not enough this year, but we'll keep plugging away at this one.
Thank you, Steve. Joe Thalman.
All right, thank you. I think number one, we need to let the law enforcement community do their job, and they need to have the backing of they'll earn the backing of the community. The community wants them there overwhelmingly. The elected officials that oversee their operations need to let them do their jobs. Don't hinder them with unrealistic rules of engagement, and let them take the criminal elements off the streets. Let them know that they will be put through the judicial system, and if found guilty, they'll be incarcerated. And don't frustrate them with the revolving door of justice, where there are elements in the community that want to go for bail reform, which means no bail at all. And then we've had the intrusions of the Democrat nominee for Vice President, Kamala Harris, tweeted to her 5 million followers to fund the Minnesota Freedom Fund to post bail for the rioters, the looters, the arsonists who damaged Lake Street and the 3rd Precinct. We don't need that kind of counterweight to good law enforcement. It really dampens the enthusiasm of those who are sworn to uphold the law, and we need. Nobody wants a bad cop removed more than the good cops. Mm-hmm. I'll close on that.
Thank you, Joe. And we'll go to Andrew Carlson, please.
Yes, thank you. All Minnesotans deserve safe communities and a fair justice system. But the fact of the matter is, currently that's not the case. We don't treat all Minnesotans equally, especially people of color, and that needs to change. If we are all to feel safe in our communities, we need to have equal justice for all. Through criminal justice reform, serving on the Judiciary and Criminal Justice Committee, we see a lot of these bills come forward and have an opportunity to address them. We need to make more progress on this. I would be remiss to not say that we also need to make significant progress on preventing senseless gun violence through criminal background checks and red flag laws. We just need to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. So, yes, Black lives do matter. We need to be looking to our communities of color to help engage in and partake in these conversations for criminal justice reform. We can't be imposing changes on people. We need to bring the entire community along with us.
Thank you, Andrew. And Michael Howard.
Thank you. The notion of protests across the country were raised, and we just need to be clear about why those protests were happening all across the country. Because an officer in Minneapolis put his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and George Floyd is gone. And that is not a unique story. People of color have been harmed by the let's be honest, systemic racism that's rampant in policing. And it's not unique problem to Minnesota. It's a problem that is part of our country's history, and we just need to acknowledge that and commit to systemic change. And the legislature took some positive steps this year. You're absolutely right that good cops don't want bad cops out there, and our arbitration reform that we passed this year is a step in that direction. Representative Carlson is right on that we need the voices of communities of color to help us lead in that change and have more involvement in strengthening the relationship between communities of color and police. And we need to do things like decriminalize marijuana, things that have led to mass incarceration and huge racial inequities. I mentioned racial inequity needs to be the lens we use with all our decisions, and no place is that more important than in criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Michael. And Michael, we'll start with you with this next question. With transportation funding, would you prioritize roads and bridges, public transit, or alternatives such as bike trails and sidewalks? Which of these is the most urgent and why?
I would submit that that's a false choice, that we need to be investing in all of those things, and all of those things are being underinvested in significantly. It's been more than 10 years since the state of Minnesota passed a significant investment in transportation. And as in a state where a bridge collapsed, it really is abhorrent that we've went this long and continue to let our infrastructure deteriorate. This is an issue in the Twin Cities. My district includes the 494 35W interchange, which as I door knock and talk with folks, really anybody can relate to being stuck in a traffic jam at 2 p.m. on a Sunday. We need to make significant investments in our roads and bridges, but we also need to invest in transit. That we need to look to the future and how Minnesotans want to get around, and they want to live in a metropolitan area with a varied way to get around. That includes pedestrian, trails, transit, and roads and bridges. And we need to come together, invest in transportation, and do so all across the state. It's all of the above, has to be.
Thank you, Michael. Andrew Carlson.
Yes, Representative Howard's right on. Transportation infrastructure is just crazy expensive, right? And you need to have a sustained funding source to continue with these projects. It's not a one and done. We can't even afford, with our budget right now, can't even afford the maintenance on the infrastructure we currently have. So the idea of new investments is going to take the will and the part of the entire legislature for years to come to sustain the funding necessary in which to do this. So, as I like to say, let's make transportation boring again. This is not something that should be political. This is something that every Minnesotan uses every day.
Thank you, Andrew. And we'll go to Steve Elkins.
Thank you. I should probably mention that I was actually a transportation economist by education, moved here 35 years ago to set airfares for a living, but I've been involved in transportation policy ever since. And I am definitely an all of the above person. So we need to be investing in the right modes for the right corridors, and that includes things like expanding 494 as we're doing, fixing the 35W 494 interchange, but it also includes the Orange Line bus rapid transit line that's also under construction on 35W, something which I advocated for 17 years to get done, going back to when I was a planning commissioner in Bloomington. I'm also an avid cyclist, and I think that biking and walking need to be a big part of the solution as well. And we are grossly underfunding all of them. And with the COVID epidemic, driving is down about 15%, which means gas tax revenues are down 15%. We don't really even have enough money to completely build out the 494 improvements, the 35W 494 improvements, which have already been committed to. There's just not enough money there, and there's not enough money to build out the bus system the way we need to as well. Without passing this bonding bill, which includes funding for 2 additional bus rapid transit lines, we're going to be woefully undervested in transit as well, and we do need to increase the gas tax.
Thank you, Steve. And Joe.
Well, everyone should celebrate the arrival of the $1 billion in matching funds from the federal government to complete the Green Line out to Eden Prairie from downtown, from the downtown transit district. So that's a huge step in the right direction. And as everyone knows, construction is well underway already. It's an impressive build out. And it's going to be exciting to see when service begins on that line. So that's a huge step in the right direction. I think all proponents of mass transit should be rejoicing that fact. We have a really tremendous blue line, green line system serving the communities already of the Twin Cities, and we're lucky to have that. It's tremendous to get in and out of the airport. Not too many cities can boast that kind of service directly into their airport, and it was some tremendous vision that provided for that luxury, that convenience. As an everyday matter, I must say that, and again, we did have the bridge collapse here. The large-scale infrastructure, overwhelmingly, I would vote to get the priority in a case of triage of, if you will, of priorities. The bridges and the overpasses and the freeway expansions are vital. Most people are going to take their kids to school, get to work in a four-wheel vehicle.
Thank you, Joe. And Joe, this next question will start with you. In the context of the pandemic, racial tensions, and the upcoming election, gun and ammunition sales have increased. In light of this, do you support new gun owner protections or expanded background checks and red flag laws?
That's a very interesting development because, as I recall, and I reference Minneapolis because so many things happen there impact the community at large. But the Minneapolis police have told people to, rather than expect a response, just be prepared to surrender your cell phone or wallet or car whenever you are approached by someone who wants to take those from you. I don't think that's acceptable. What happens in Rome may echo through the empire, but we can't just stay safe at home in Bloomington, Eden Prairie, Edina, Minnetonka. We all go into the big city. We go to St. Paul. We go to Minneapolis. You can't have an area of no response where, like a bad cell phone plan would leave you without service. If you are needing service in Minneapolis and you call 911, you better be able to expect a response and a timely one. But if the police are going to say, basically surrender your goods or protect yourself, I don't know what they'd expect people to do other than to go out and purchase guns, ammunition to protect themselves, to protect their home, to protect their children and their wives. I think it's the sensible thing to do.
Thank you, Joe. We'll go to Steve Elkins.
Sure. The House passed House Files 8 and 9 last year, which would have enacted the red flag law protections and the universal background checks. We recently had a murder in Bloomington that was a textbook example of why we need the red flag law, where a gentleman who was in a mental health crisis murdered his wife and then severely injured, shot two kids who are next door who witnessed the crime. That's exactly the kind of situation that we're trying to head off with the red flag laws. I was proud to see that our police chief, Jeff Potts, representing the Minnesota Police Chiefs Association, regularly was at the Capitol testifying in favor of those two laws, because he sees, as do all of the police chiefs, the issues that these two laws would address. In terms of just how general things are going, we're seeing, people show up at protests on both the right, Boogaloo boys with their AR-15s and Antifa guys with the pistols in their pockets. And, this brandishing of guns in public during the protests, no good can come of this. It's just gotten completely out of hand.
Thank you, Steve. And we will go to Michael Howard.
It is beyond ludicrous that we haven't passed legislation to ensure that background checks are completed on all guns. It's something that 90% of Minnesotans support. You can't get 90% of Minnesotans to agree on just about anything. And 9 in 10 folks in Minnesota think that if you buy a gun, you ought to complete a background check. And Representative Elkins hit the nail on the head with the red flag laws. We've seen examples in our own backyard and across the country why this is such an important piece of legislation to save lives. It'll also help us prevent suicide by gun, the red flag laws. And it is ironic to me that, as Representative Elkins mentioned, the House passed these bills, the Republican-led Senate blocked them. They refused to even consider them, really. And the Republican-led Senate wants to kind of bang their chest and say they're the law and order party and they stand with their police and their law enforcement. But guess what? Law enforcement wants to pass these laws. They think it will be in the interest of the public safety of our communities if there's background checks on all guns, if red flag laws are passed. And so if we truly want to stand with our police, a good step is to pass these two common sense gun violence prevention laws.
Thank you, Michael. And we'll go to Andrew Carlson.
My colleagues really just did an amazing job on describing the reasons why we need to pass both these bills. I am proud to be a co-author on both the extreme risk protection orders or red flag laws as well as the universal background checks. There is nothing more for me to add other than what those two gentlemen just said in terms of why this is so critical, especially in today's day and age, to keep guns out of the hands of people that will be deemed dangerous and keep our community safe.
Thank you, Andrew. This next question will start with you.
Sure.
Given the surge in homelessness, what do you think the Minnesota Legislature can do to make housing affordable for Minnesotans of limited means?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time over the last 2 years addressing the housing crisis. And I'm very proud of our Bloomington City Council and the actions that they have taken. Again, Bloomington, once again, is leading in this effort with changes to certain city ordinances and putting funds aside to address this. Bloomington has the largest food shelf in the state through Veep, and it's now more than ever a critical lifeline for a lot of families. Homelessness, addressing homelessness is so fundamental to everything else. It is the basis for our society. Everybody deserves a safe and stable home. Really, this is just a matter, in my opinion, of funding our values. Putting those precious tax dollars towards the necessity of making sure that every Minnesotan is properly housed. We can do this. This is not an equation that is impossible to solve. We know what the answers are. There are plenty of good solutions out there, and in 15 seconds, I can't get into all of them. I'm hoping my colleagues can kind of pick up where I'm leaving off here, but I do want to highlight the importantness of this subject and getting back to where we can address these in a more formal way. I look forward to in the coming legislative session.
Thank you, Andrew. And we'll go to Michael Howard.
Housing is perhaps my greatest passion at the legislature. I was proud to serve as the vice chair of our committee. And the reason why housing is so important to me is that whether we're talking about disparities in our schools, health outcomes, economic outcomes, all roads truly lead back to home. Mm-hmm. If families and children don't have stable, affordable housing, then so many other societal issues that we try to solve at the Capitol are not going to be effective. And so we need to start by setting out to make sure that every Minnesotan has access to an affordable place to live. And there's a lot of things we need to do, but we need big, bold solutions. One bill that I authored last year was the Bring It Home housing subsidy, which would create a housing subsidy to ensure that every single Minnesotan is not paying more than 30% of their income on housing. Basically, only 1 in 4 that qualify for a Section 8 housing voucher with federal dollars can access it. We would backfill that to make sure that every Minnesotan can afford a place to live. And then we need to build more homes that are affordable, and we need to preserve the homes that are currently affordable. We've seen in our area so many affordable housing facilities, multi-tenant facilities get flipped and people displaced. We need to take action to make sure that folks can afford to stay in their homes and improve the quality. It's a big challenge. I would argue it's maybe the most important challenge that the state take on next session.
Thank you, Michael. And we'll go to Joe.
Okay. I do have a little bit of experience with this. I have a degree in real estate finance from the University of Utah. Worked my way through college selling apartment buildings and investment properties. And then worked in Southern California, also selling, brokering, leasing, and managing large apartment complexes, commercial properties, and various types of properties for the syndicators I worked for. Anyways, the housing cycle is just that. It tends to go from an undersupply, and that induces builders to acquire land and put up units, and then there's an oversupply. It's a very cyclical, predictable wave. Presently, we have throughout the metro area, in various pockets of the metro, we have double-digit vacancy rates. There's housing available out there. Unfortunately, people have had their hours cut back. They've been laid off. They don't have the funds to afford the rent or the mortgage payment, and through no fault of their own, and this is a human crisis, a human tragedy, that good people who were working their jobs a few months ago are left out in the street wondering what happened to my life. We need to get the jobs open again so that people can get back to work and resume their own affairs, managing their own affairs with the dignity of not requiring assistance for that. There are, of course, always going to be some truly needy cases in any community, and our hearts are open to those people who need assistance. But for the most part, let people have the dignity of providing for themselves, being autonomous, being independent, and contributing to the community.
Thank you, Joe. And Steve Elkins.
Thank you. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Representative Howard, who really is a hero on this issue. And I think he ran out of time before he could mention the $100 million rental relief bill that he also shepherded into law this year. So kudos. So nice job. I think that, for my part, I'm also working with Representative Howard and Representative Fisher and Republican State Senator Rich Draheim in the Senate as well, and my focus has been on capitalizing on my 20 years on working on housing and development issues at the municipal level, on a bill that would very comprehensive bill that would sweep away some of the regulatory burdens that make it hard for builders to build additional housing. We're just not building enough housing in this region, period, and the burden falls most heavily on those at the bottom of the economic ladder. I had an article published in the Star Tribune. If you Google Flaming Hoops, Steve Elkins, Star Tribune, you'll find the article, but it explained a lot of the barriers that I'm looking to address in this bill to just make it easier for builders to build more housing and build more affordable housing.
Thank you, Steve. And we will start with you for this next question.
Mm-hmm.
Would you strive to make Minnesota's energy grid carbon-free? If so, by when and how? If not, why not?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, I think we're definitely. I think Minnesota is actually ahead of most states in terms of setting very ambitious goals to getting to a carbon-free grid. And Xcel Energy in particular, our local utility here, is planning to try and get to carbon-free by, I think it's like 2030, roughly, and in that time frame. And it'll be a combination of wind and solar. Assuming that our nuclear power plants don't become too expensive to maintain, I think nuclear will continue to be a big part of the grid. I think the electrification of the vehicle fleet is going to make a big difference. Right now, vehicles are responsible for about 30% of all emissions in in the state. So as we move to an electrified fleet, that's going to make a big difference as well. But I definitely support moving to a completely carbon-free grid, and I think we're actually making good progress on that.
Thank you, Steve. And we'll go to Joe.
I have to admire Mr. Elkins for leading the way on that and pulled up in a really nice Tesla tonight. It's kind of an aspirational car for most of us who would enjoy driving an electric car down the road. It's a beautiful machine. And I think the zero carbon footprint is a noble goal, and I hope we can get there and the time frame allocated. We need to just be mindful that we don't get out over our skis and find ourselves too far out over our skis and find ourselves in the position of some of the California communities that have overcommitted to the carbon-free renewable sources of energy, and now they don't have enough energy during a heat wave to allow everybody to keep the air conditioning running and keeping their households lit and watch TV at night. They actually have rolling blackouts and rolling brownouts throughout the state. I've spent a lot of time in California, so I reference it a lot because I'm keenly aware of some of the aspirational goals they set and some of the shortcomings that they set themselves up unintentionally. But yeah, I think if we can go to cleaner cars and we don't have any exhaust in the city, we don't have any soot, anything coming out of our cars, who wouldn't want that? Sure, we'd all want that. The nuclear part of the equation is always a little bit complicated. It's enticing, but it does have some really serious drawbacks in terms of long-term storage of waste, which is usually transported across the country to a mine in Nevada, and you just keep your fingers crossed that nothing happens on one of those 18-wheel odysseys across the country to the nuclear waste.
Thank you, Joe. And we'll go to Andrew Carlson next.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry if I was looking back at all the things that didn't get done this past year in terms of climate and energy. A lot of work that still needs to be done, but can you repeat the exact question, please?
Would you strive to make Minnesota's energy grid carbon-free? If so, by when and how? If not, why not?
Yes, absolutely, I would strive. The fact is, Minnesota is one of the fastest warming states in the country. We see that throughout the states through climate change activities that are occurring. So we do need to get on top of this. But we also have the opportunity to be a leader. As I was previously saying, a lot of bold initiatives that were brought forward by the DFL were just did not have a chance to advance. A lot of the activity that did occur with addressing climate change had to do with funding specific projects. I'll just mention the one that I was the chief author on, which was the Prairie Island Net Zero Emissions Project. This is going to help out the Prairie Island Indian community become net zero here in the next 25 years. So very excited to see how that can serve as a model for the rest of the state.
Thank you, Andrew. And then we'll go to Michael Howard.
This is a hugely important issue. We do have a climate crisis, and I would venture to say that if you polled the youngest voters and high school students, they would say this is the most important issue. Last summer, I joined high school students at the state capitol, thousands of them rallying for action on climate. It actually seems like it was about a decade ago, but it was just last summer to see those students there fighting for change. And so I am a co-author to the 100% clean energy by 2050 legislation. It is realistic. Just a decade prior, under Governor Pawlenty, on a bipartisan basis, the legislature passed a nation-leading renewable energy standard. At that time, critics said, there's no way you're going to get to that by 2020, and the state is succeeding. And so it is a realistic goal, and going 100% by 2050 is an opportunity in terms of an economic competitive edge for Minnesota to lead on wind and solar. It's a no-brainer. And when you look at what is going on in the West right now, we just need to be upfront that the climate crisis is real. It threatens our entire way of life as Minnesotans. And so this is such an important work. And the 100% by 2050 is an important bill, and we got to move forward with it next year.
Thank you, Michael. So for this next question, we're actually going to start with Joe. What can the Minnesota Legislature do to ensure that all Minnesotans can afford high-quality health care?
Why, where's my crystal ball? That's a massively complex question, and I would refer that to a room full of healthcare providers, healthcare administrators, professionals who really know what is involved in providing. We already provide the quality healthcare. We have the best healthcare system maybe in the world, and we're very fortunate to have that. The question is, how's that paid for? But I've seen options in the faith-based community that have greatly reduced options, and there is a physicians group, I believe it's in Kansas City, that has a very reduced price. I believe it's $150 per person for a basic slate of services. It doesn't include the high-level care of major surgery and that sort of thing. But there are market-based options out there available. They need to be more widely known and marketed, I guess. There are some limitations to insurance healthcare being marketed across state lines. I don't know why that barrier doesn't come down. It's one of the few industries that is faced with such barriers. Anything you want to buy at the market or a car or anything else, you can go out and shop around, buy it wherever you want, and take it home. I think healthcare should be the same way.
Thank you, Joe. And we'll go to Michael Howard next.
I believe the healthcare system in our state and country is fundamentally broken, and we just need to acknowledge that. And it's on display during this COVID crisis. We're the only country in the world where millions of people have lost their health insurance during a global health pandemic. So we need to commit to creating a future where everyone has access to affordable health care. I support Minnesota Care for All, moving in that direction. And it's a long-term prospect. Our healthcare system is incredibly complicated by design of those that are profiting richly off of it. But we need to move towards a Minnesota Care for All system. In the meantime, I really believe we need to continue to focus on reducing the cost of prescription drugs. This is an issue that affects everyone. And obviously, the cost of insulin has been front and center at the legislature, but it's not the only medication vital for folks to live that has skyrocketed in recent years. So I support legislation, a unified drug benefit bill where the state would use the leverage of the state to bargain for lower prescription drug prices. I also support a prescription drug price board. This was a bipartisan bill where we would sort of create almost like a utilities commission that would, again, have the state representing the people in fighting for affordable prescription drug prices against these gigantic corporate interests that have profited so richly off it. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. And next we will go to Andrew Carlson.
Thank you. Minnesotans shouldn't die because they can't afford health care or life-saving medications. I mean, I think that's a value statement that most Minnesotans would agree with. We did make a little bit of progress this last legislative session, passing some bills. The Insulin Affordability Act, which Michael Howard was just amazing on. Prescription drug price transparency, we made some progress there. Prior authorization reform. And then along the public health lines, Tobacco 21, requiring no sale of tobacco to persons under the age of 21. So we are making progress. We do know what we can do to help reduce the cost of health care. We just need a sustained effort in moving that forward. There is a lot of work that still needs to be done within healthcare, but again, I don't want public health to be left out of that equation. As I said before, as this pandemic has shown, public health, I think, is important to all of us and can make a big impact on everyone's lives.
Thank you, Andrew. And we'll go to Steve Elkins.
Thank you. Yes, I support universal health care coverage. I support MNsure and Minnesota Care, which provide access to affordable health care for Minnesotans who can't get it through their employment. I am personally a Medicare beneficiary. And it's a pretty sweet gig, but and so I kind of like the idea of Medicare for all. But I think one needs to understand that 80% of us on Medicare are tapping some sort of private insurance to either replace basic Medicare or to supplement basic Medicare. My wife and I have a Medicare Advantage plan, which is about a third of Americans have that kind of a Medicare plan. Another 40% of Americans have some sort of Medigap or Medicare supplement plan. Only, less than 15% of Americans on Medicare only have plain old original Medicare with nothing else to supplement it. So I think that there's always going to be a role for the private industry and as part of a competitive solution. The part that I'm worried about most, or that we're working on personally, for leveraging my background is healthcare pricing transparency. So I've done a ton of study of the drug marketplace, and have developed bills that would require both hospitals, drug manufacturers to list their prices, freeze them for the year, so that people's formularies could be frozen as well.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, this will be our last question of this evening, and we'll start with Andrew Carlson. Minnesota is notorious for its educational achievement gap. What can the Minnesota Legislature do to address this, and how do we afford it? Andrew, we'll start with you on that
Yes,
question.
thank you. I'm collecting my thoughts because it's an issue that, in light of all the things we talked about today, to save education for last almost seems wrong. The education gap, again, where those communities of color are disproportionately not receiving the same advantages as other Minnesotans, needs to be fixed. And there are solutions to address this problem, and I know that there have been efforts in which to move forward with. Having two daughters attending Bloomington Public Schools and seeing the work that our amazing public school teachers are doing, especially in this time of challenge, is just it just fills my heart that the passion they have for their work as well as for their students. But we need to solve this problem. The future of Minnesota depends on it. I wish it was an issue that we could spend some more time talking about. I do see that it gets attention in the coming legislative session. I hope it is an area that, again, that we do no harm, so that students can receive a world-class education here in Minnesota.
Thank you, Andrew. And we'll go to Michael Howard next.
Minnesota does have an abhorrent opportunity gap, and what I think we need to recognize is that we need solutions that just recognize the racial inequities that are present system-wide. We've already talked about housing. I'm going to blank on the exact numbers. Well over 100 Bloomington students experience homelessness in a school year. In Richfield, we had over 100 students lose their homes when a apartment complex was flipped. And how are those students? And those students are renters, predominantly students of color, having to move schools. And how are they expected to show up and learn if they don't have access to affordable housing? So, housing is an example. We need to invest in childcare, in equity in childcare. We need paid family and medical leave. All of these issues are wrapped up in our racial inequities and must be a focus. We absolutely need to invest in our schools. And in particular, we need to, we've mentioned teachers, and I too share just admiration for the Herculean work that our teachers are doing. I have got a kindergartner who is doing kindergarten via Zoom. The kindergarten teacher has 36 kindergartners that she's teaching via a computer, and is doing amazing work. And we need to invest in education and our teachers, and we need to pass the Teachers of Color Act to invest so that more students of color have teachers that look like them. So it's a huge issue and multifaceted, and it should be a top priority next legislative session.
Thank you, Michael. And we'll go to Steve Elkins.
Yeah, I think that actually in the long run, the achievement gap is probably Minnesota's most important problem to solve, because we've always succeeded because we're a brain power state. Ever since the Minnesota Miracle 50 years ago, where the state took over the lion's share of the funding for education, we've been a leader in funding education equitably, and we're gradually losing that tradition. And if we don't educate the next generation, which is going to be much more diverse than certainly Joe's and mine's generations, if we don't educate them as well as we educated our own children, the state's not going to be able to succeed on the same basis that it has before, has always done. And I think that the one thing that seems to work that I think we should invest in more, that the data is there to support it, is a greater investment in early childhood education for disadvantaged students. That would be the number one thing, I think. And I know that right now the forced reliance on distance learning is just making the disparities worse. I built the first data warehouse at Capella University about 15 years ago, and the key insight out of that was that at the college level, the only ones who really thrived with distance learning were graduate students who were mid-career and very highly motivated. So Capella didn't even want to get into bachelor's education, so I can only imagine what it's like for trying to teach high school kids and elementary school kids with distance learning right now. It's just not going to work very well.
Thank you, Steve. And then Joe Thalman.
Yeah, education affects us all going forward, and we have one educator in our family, and I have spoken with a few neighbors and friends who are in education. One example, a neighbor of ours who is a very, very dedicated teacher. Those kids are lucky to have her. She has to work across 3 different platforms. She has an Apple, she has a Windows machine, and then a Droid machine to be able to accommodate all of the students' different platforms. And she's working 10 and 12-hour days routinely. She's absolutely exhausting herself. God bless her and all the teachers who are tackling this and putting everything they have into it. There are answers out there to closing the education gap, and it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel. Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, and I would point to a program called the Harlem Success Academy. It is a school that, as I recall, has a strict dress code. They have a strict standard of academic expectations, and there are no lowered expectations. Some of the new teaching programs that have come into the school systems have catered to personal needs and training. The Harlem Success Academy inverts that and says, these are our standards, meet them, you will be successful. Those kids love their headmaster, and they love the discipline that school imposes on them and the high standards that they meet.
Thank you, Joe. All right, we will now go to our closing remarks. You'll have 1 minute for your closing remark, and we will switch the order opposite of what we did for our opening remarks. So we'll start first with Andrew Carlson.
Thank you. I'd like to close by saying that it's time to fund the things that ensure the well-being of our community, such as affordable housing, strong schools, good jobs, clean air and water, and a public safety system that protects all of us. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done at the Capitol. I am proud to serve the residents of Bloomington, and it is a job I take very seriously. And if I can ever be of any service to you, please don't hesitate to reach out and give me a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Michael Howard.
I want to thank Bloomington residents for submitting the questions into our moderator and timekeeper. And I would encourage folks to reach out to me individually if you have further questions. You can call me on my cell phone at 612-207-7396 or email me at michaelhowardmn@gmail.com. These are trying times with Minnesotans facing such immense challenges. But if we lead by believing in science reason, by rejecting the politics of fear and division, and if we practice a politics where we put ourselves in the shoes of others and lead with empathy and make sure that Minnesotans have access to good schools, affordable health care, an affordable place to live, if we recognize in our neighbors what our neighbors want for each other, we can build a Minnesota where everyone has an opportunity to succeed. And it would be my honor to fight alongside you in Bloomington to make this community and state a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And we will go to Joe Thalman.
All right. I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting us tonight, and my colleagues who shared the stage with us tonight, Steve and Michael and Andrew, up and down the line. I read some stats the other day at ranked choice voting. A third of voters don't even know their own party's candidates for Congress. If they had any idea how much time and hard work goes into running, it's just sad and ironic. But I want to say in closing that we've grown up in enjoying a beautiful country that's been unified for the most part. There's so much rancor right now going on in this country, and come November 4th, whoever you vote for, let's just close ranks, reunify as a country, move forward, accept who wins, who loses, and let there be peace. And like they used to do, just, they'll regroup and go after try to get your wins the next go round. But let's all agree to that.
Thank you, Joe. Steve Elkins.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank the League for providing the opportunity again. Nice job, ladies. This worked out pretty well. And I'd just like to reiterate that I feel blessed to both live in and represent a community where we do feel safe, where we have a well-trained, very highly professional police department, where if we have completely justified, racial justice protests, the protesters get a police escort, where the police chief regularly appears at the Capitol to advocate for common sense gun laws, where the police department is a member of the community policing collaborative and making a serious effort to engage with our communities in color. And where I'm signed up to participate in the next Citizens Police Academy the next time that it's offered. So this is a good place to live, and we're going to do everything we can to keep it that way.
Thank you, Steve. This concludes our question and answer section for tonight's program. Thank you to the candidates for participating in this forum and for your willingness to run and for your willingness to participate in the democratic process by running for office. Thank you to the League of Women Voters Bloomington for sponsoring this forum. It can be viewed online on the League of Women Voters Bloomington website, on the City of Bloomington's website, and on YouTube. It will also be rebroadcast on the Bloomington Cable TV until Election Day. Thank you especially to our at-home audience for watching this recorded forum. Remember to vote on or before Election Day, Tuesday, November 3, 2020. For information about registering to vote, voting early, and voting in person, visit the Minnesota Secretary of State's website, www.mnvotes.org. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.